The Dark Scrolls. They say her name with trembling lips and half-forgotten breath, Semiramis, a name that once rose like incense into the heavens, and now lingers like a ghost among the ruins of Babylon. Hers was a beauty not cast from flesh alone, but from myth and shadow, and the memory of fire dancing on still water. No birth was ever claimed for her, no crib, no wet nurse, no lullaby. Only that she arrived one night with the flood, barefoot upon the marble floor of the king's garden, eyes like stormlight, hair blacker than the oil lamps she extinguished with a glance. The old priests whispered she was sired by a fish goddess and fire, but such things are only said when no other explanation will suffice. The queen she became was not made by courtly rituals or the favor of kings. She claimed her place as though the throne had awaited her since time's first breath. Men knelt before her not out of loyalty, but because their knees gave way beneath her gaze. Her voice could silence peacocks. Her silence made jackals whimper. In her palace the air was always warm, always thick with sandalwood and something else, a sweetness like decay wrapped in roses. No one remembered hearing her footsteps, yet she was always behind you when you thought you were alone. Tapestries clung to the walls like secrets. Mirrors turned dark in her presence. Her bedchamber was forbidden to all but the boldest of souls, and even they emerged pale, lips bitten through, memories blurred as if touched by smoke. But there was one night that bled into history like ink into papyrus, never fully dry, never fully erased. It was the night of the blood moon, when the Tigris hissed low and red beneath the bridge, and the torches along the ziggurat stairs flickered without wind. The queen summoned 100 slaves, not warriors, not courtiers. Slaves, taken from the corners of conquest, each with a body chosen for beauty, not for strength. Skin like dusk, like marble, like burnished bronze. Eyes wide, some with fear, others with wonder. They were not told why they were chosen, only that they were to bathe in rose water, to anoint their limbs with oil, and to await her call in the colonnade of the west wing. They stood barefoot upon the cold stone, the moonlight painting silver lines across their shoulders, whispering among themselves with words stolen from a dozen tongues. Some prayed, others bragged. One wept quietly, his tears mixing with the scent of myrrh in the air. When she entered, silence fell like the guillotine. She wore only a veil of indigo and chains of gold so fine they hissed like snakes when she moved. Her hands were bare, her feet untouched by dust. Her eyes did not blink. Not once. She walked among them without haste, without smile, and for each man she paused, not to ask his name, not to speak at all, but to look into him, like she was searching for something behind the bone. One by one she touched their cheeks, their throats, their hearts. Then she turned and beckoned. They followed, through the garden of obsidian statues, where none dared walk past dusk, through the door that opened without sound, into the chamber of the moon, a hall whose walls were made of black glass, whose ceiling was painted with constellations no scholar could name. In its center, her bed, raised upon a dais of onyx and silk, surrounded by urns filled with white lilies and something darker. She sat upon the edge of that bed and whispered, "Come." The first stepped forward, then the second, then the third, and the chamber swallowed the rest. What passed that night cannot be truly told, for there are no words that do not tarnish the silence that followed. Some say she danced with each of them, slow and bare beneath the lunar shadows. Others say she spoke riddles into their mouths and took their breath in return. A few whisper that each man was kissed, and with that kiss, unmade. But the truth, if such a thing still breathes, is not in the words. It is in what was found at dawn. A servant girl, young and half-blind from birth, entered the chamber with a jug of wine and a trembling heart. She expected the usual silence, the thick perfume, the doves fluttering along the eaves. Instead, she dropped the jug. Clay shattered. Wine bled into the stones like blood. They were there, all 100, laid like offerings around the bed. Not in violence, not in ruin, but in peace that felt too still, too heavy, their skin unbroken, their mouths closed, their eyes open and unfocused, as if staring into the moment before sleep, but never reaching it. The queen sat among them, bare and silent, her hands folded in her lap like a girl who had finished her prayers. No sound escaped the chamber. No bird sang. Even the air seemed unwilling to move. And then, as the girl turned to flee, she heard the queen speak. "Love," she said, "is a hunger best fed with silence." The girl fled. She never returned. The bodies were taken away before the court could awaken. No pyres were lit, no funerals held. The records simply marked each name with a single symbol, a black circle, like the moon's eye shut tight. In the days that followed, no one dared ask the queen, not the viziers, not the priests. One who tried was found at the base of the tower with his neck turned the wrong way. But the city changed. The fountains ran colder. The sky hung lower. Women wrapped their children in charms. Men walked faster past the palace walls. And the queen was seen less and less until she vanished altogether. Some say she returned to the river, walked barefoot into its crimson waters, and became a fish again. Others believe she still walks the corridors of that palace, waiting for the next 100 hearts. But most simply whisper her name, Semiramis, and watch the shadows for signs of her breath. Because some stories are not meant to be remembered. They are meant to haunt. And this was only the beginning. Beneath the hush that settled over the city, beneath the hush that no priest dared name, a weight hung over Babylon like fog that would not lift. The queen's chamber, once the heart of opulence and delight, now felt like a tomb veiled in silk. Yet it was no grief that lingered, no mourning that crept along the stones. It was expectancy, like the earth before an eclipse or the skin before a blade. Days turned, and the moon healed from her blood. But in the palace time thickened like honey. Servants walked softer, as though their footsteps might disturb whatever had taken root beneath the marble floors. The great lion court stood empty. The peacocks, once bold and vain, had gone silent, their feathers dulled to ash. No one dared touch the columns of obsidian where the queen had passed. They said the stone remembered, that if you leaned close enough, you could hear a breath that was not yours. And then came the dreams. It began with the guards, hardened men with scars beneath their armor, men who had survived wars and ambushes in the eastern sands. They began waking at night, trembling, their mouths full of the scent of lilies and smoke. One by one they abandoned their posts. Some disappeared into the desert, their armor left neatly folded like abandoned skin. Others were found wandering the ziggurat halls, whispering names no one had spoken aloud in years. The physicians claimed it was fever, a sickness of the mind. The priests said it was punishment, a reckoning for indulgence unmeasured. But the oldest among them, a woman called Atima, who once served the queen's grandmother, she said nothing. She simply tied red thread around her wrists and would not drink from any vessel that had touched palace hands. Rumors bloomed like bruises. They said the 100 had not truly died, but slept, beneath the palace in a chamber carved from the bones of the first gods. That Semiramis walked among them still, barefoot and veiled, touching their closed eyes to keep the sleep from fading. Others said the queen was no longer one, but many, that each of the dead men had left something behind, and she had swallowed it whole. A breath, a heartbeat, a dream, a scream. Still no one left, for fear binds tighter than hope, and power, true power, makes cowards of even the proudest. One evening, as the sun bled orange into the Euphrates, a visitor arrived. He came on foot, cloaked in the blue of forgotten dynasties, his face veiled in gauze so fine it shimmered like heat. He bore no guards, no offerings, only a small scroll sealed with a symbol none could name, a circle within a circle, pierced at its heart with a thorn. The eunuch at the gate hesitated, for his hands shook too badly to open the door. But the stranger did not need entry. He whispered something in the old tongue, and the bronze locks opened of their own accord. The palace did not welcome him. The air seemed to recoil. Lamps flickered, curtains curled like the wings of frightened moths. But still he walked, unchallenged, to the chamber of the queen. She waited, of course. She always waited. She sat upon the dais, draped in shadow, her limbs coiled like vines at rest. She was not adorned in jewels this night, nor silks, only her skin pale as the underbelly of a dying dove, and a veil darker than sleep. The stranger knelt before her without a word. Then he raised the scroll. She did not take it. Instead, she leaned forward, her lips parting with the sound of leaves splitting in frost. "You are late," she said. The man looked up. "I was not summoned." Her head tilted, and the veil shifted just enough to reveal the gleam of one eye. "Violet, unfathomable. You were not summoned," she whispered, "because you should never have left." He removed the veil then, and the air gasped. He was beautiful, but not in the way of men. There was something too still about him, too precise. His face bore no lines, no memory of sunlight, and yet his gaze was older than hers, older than the throne, older than Babylon itself. "I came to watch," he said. Semiramis laughed, and the sound rang like chimes beneath the sea. "To watch?" she echoed. "Or to mourn?" The silence between them stretched like a knife. At last he stood. The scroll remained sealed. "You have crossed the threshold," he said softly. "What was once echo is now wound. What was once desire is now grief. The breath you stole has a price." She stood, and the room dimmed, not from shadow, but from something deeper, like the color of dreams draining from the air. "They gave it freely," she said. "They didn't know what they gave." "But I knew." And in that moment the palace seemed to breathe. The lilies in their urns turned brown at the edges. The walls pulsed like skin beneath water. "I have touched the divine," she said. "I have tasted the fear that dwells beneath pleasure. I have felt men die not from wounds, but from longing unmet. You have made them hollow. I have made them eternal." The stranger shook his head. He turned to leave, but before he crossed the threshold, he spoke once more. "They will return." She did not ask who. She did not need to. He vanished before his shadow reached the doorway, and with him the last piece of silence was gone. That night the sky cracked. No rain fell, yet the earth drank. The stars flickered and turned their faces. In the lower levels of the palace, where no door had opened in a century, stone began to hum. From their forgotten tombs the 100 stirred, but not as men. They came without sound, without breath. Their eyes glowed not with life, but with memory. Their bodies moved as if pulled by a single thought, not their own. They passed through stone. They stepped over water. They did not look left or right. They came for her, and she welcomed them. The chamber of the moon opened once more, and she waited, arms wide, the veil lifted, her voice a song without words. "My beloveds," she whispered, "come to me again." They encircled her like shadows. Some wept, others smiled with mouths that had forgotten how. But all bowed their heads, and she in turn kissed each one upon the brow. One by one their forms began to dissolve, not into ash, not into air, but into her skin, her breath, her hair. Their memories stitched themselves into her voice, their longing curled beneath her nails, until there was only her, Semiramis, more than queen, less than god, neither woman nor wraith, a vessel, a wound, a hunger eternal. And in the stillness that followed, Babylon slept, but did not dream, not any more. In the hush that followed the return of the 100, the palace did not stir for 3 days. No birds circled the towers, no incense curled from temple fires. Even the Euphrates, flowing endlessly beneath Babylon's golden bridges, slowed its current, as though the river itself was afraid to witness what had begun. The silence was no longer merely absence. It had a weight, a presence, like breath on the nape of your neck. And no one there. Semiramis did not emerge. She did not eat, nor drink, nor summon her servants. The halls of obsidian grew colder, and the statues that lined her gardens, figures of forgotten gods and broken lovers, began to crack along their spines, as if burdened by an unseen grief. Whispers spread beyond the palace walls. Mothers warned their children not to say the queen's name after dusk. Dancers refused to perform within earshot of the palace. Even the merchants, whose gold depended on the pulse of Babylon's court, found their fingers trembling as they counted their coins, for each coin, they swore, bore the sound of distant weeping when dropped. In the ziggurat's shadow, old Itama, now blind in both eyes, sat beneath a fig tree and began to hum a song no one else remembered. The words were broken, the melody fractured, but those who passed by claimed the air shimmered where she sat, as if time there was thinning, and the present could no longer bear the weight of what had once been. And deep beneath it all, in the chamber of the moon, Semiramis sat alone, but not truly alone, for she had become a house of voices. Each of the 100 stirred within her, not screaming, not angry, but whispering things that did not belong to this world, names of stars without light, touches that left no mark, desires that unraveled language. She felt them move beneath her skin like tides beneath ice. She felt their memories, childhood shattered, dreams unfinished, songs never sung aloud. She had thought she could hold them, that in her body they would find peace, that she could cradle their grief and redeem it. But grief does not sleep, and love, when taken, becomes a flame without source. It burns but never warms. And so she wandered, not through the palace, but through herself. Each corridor of her soul a memory she did not live. Each doorway opened to a silence not her own. In a mirror once sacred to the god of light, she saw her reflection and did not know her face. Her skin now shimmered faintly, as though lit from within by coals not yet cooled. Her eyes had turned darker, not black, but deep violet like dusk, moments before it swallows the sky. Her hair moved even when there was no wind. And when she spoke, the chamber echoed not with one voice, but many, soft, overlapping like reeds rustling in distant waters. She began to forget her own name. She began to remember theirs. Then one night she dreamt, though dreams had long abandoned her. In that dream she stood at the edge of a desert. The sky was neither night nor day. The sand beneath her feet was warm with memory, and before her stood a woman she had never seen, or had always known. The woman wore no crown, no jewels, only a simple garment the color of dusk. Her face was not beautiful, not plain. It was everything, familiar and strange, young and ancient. "Why have you come?" the woman asked. Semiramis tried to answer, but no words would come. The woman reached out and placed a hand upon her chest. Her touch was cool, like moonlight through water. "You opened a door," she said, "and now you must walk through it." Semiramis looked down. Beneath her feet the sand began to shift. From beneath it, fingers emerged, hands, arms, shoulders. 100 bodies rising not in agony, but in yearning. They did not pull her down. They reached up, to touch, to remember, to ask. "Do you love us?" they asked in one voice. She wept. "I tried," she whispered, "but I did not know how." And then the dream shattered, not like glass but like silence, ruptured by the weight of truth. She awoke in the chamber of the moon, alone, or so she thought. Across from her stood a boy. He was no older than 10, barefoot, with dark hair and skin the color of river clay. His eyes were impossibly still, not fearful, not curious, only watching. She had not summoned him. She did not know how he had entered. "Who are you?" she asked, rising. The boy said nothing. She stepped closer, and closer still, but his gaze never left hers. When she reached out to touch him, her fingers passed through air, not empty air, cold air, wet, like the breath of the dead. "I am the first," the boy said at last, "the first you kissed, the first who bled." Semiramis fell to her knees. The boy knelt beside her. "You took everything," he said, not accusing, not unkind, but left the hunger behind. She shuddered. "I was lonely," she whispered. "They loved me for a moment, and then they left. I only wanted them to stay." The boy tilted his head. "So you turned them into silence. And now the silence speaks." The walls of the chamber began to pulse again, not with light but with memory, laughter, weeping, shouts, moans, a symphony of lives unfinished. The boy stood. "They are not yours," he said. "You are theirs." And with that he vanished, but not into air, into her. He was the last, the 101. And Semiramis knew then she was no longer a woman, nor queen, nor goddess. She was a monument, a shrine to hunger, and hunger has no name. That night the palace cracked, not from fire, not from war, but from within. The great columns groaned, the statues shattered. The obsidian floor split open, revealing not earth, but water, dark, endless, cold. The chamber of the moon collapsed into itself. And when the sun rose, it found nothing but an empty hollow where once a palace stood. Semiramis was gone. No tomb was found, no body. Only lilies drifting upon the river, their petals stained with ash and silence. But stories, even those smothered beneath silence and stone, do not end when a queen disappears. They settle, they sleep in the soil, they nest in the corners of old maps and cracked walls. And when the world dares forget, they wake. Many seasons passed after the fall of Semiramis. Babylon did not rebuild the palace. No one dared. The land where it once stood was left untouched, fenced not with walls but with memory. And though the court moved eastward and new kings sat on thrones with names that echoed hollow, none ever spoke of the obsidian palace again. Not aloud, but the whispers remained. They say birds refused to fly over that place, that no rain ever fell there, that the lilies which grew wild in the ruins never died, never bloomed, only watched. And then, one spring, many years later, a child vanished. A girl, just 13, wandered too far during a festival and was seen no more. The guards searched for days, dragging the reeds by the river, lighting fires through the southern gardens. They found nothing, except a single lily placed on her pillow when no one had entered her home. Her mother never spoke again. Then another. A boy this time, 7 years old, gone from the marketplace before his father could tie his sandal. And then a third, each time the same. No sound, no struggle, no trace. Only a lily, freshly plucked and white as bone. The city remembered, and it was afraid. They turned to the priests, but the priests had long since forgotten their gods. They turned to the stars, but the stars had turned their backs. So they turned to her, the old one, the blind one, if she still breathed. Etema. She had not left her fig tree in 3 decades. Her hair had turned to silver vines, her back bent like an old bow. But her voice still held weight. When the people came, she waited until all had knelt, until the wind fell still. Then she said, "You left her hungry." They asked her what she meant. "She is no longer a woman," Atema whispered. "She is a well, and a well must be filled. You fed her once with flesh. Now she drinks innocence." The people begged her. What could they do? How could they end it? "You cannot end a wound," Atema said. "You can only bind it, or bleed with it." But they were afraid. They did not want to bleed, so they offered prayers. They built a wall around the ruins carved with wards and sacred glyphs. They placed guards chained in silver and silence. They sacrificed a lamb each full moon at the gate, and for a time it worked. For 30 years the lilies did not bloom. But stories do not sleep forever. It was not a child this time. It was a woman. She came from the east, cloaked in traveler's dust, her eyes sharp, her hands scarred from salt and ink. She was a scribe, or so she claimed, gathering the lost songs of ancient queens. She came with no guards, no priests, no offering. She came with only a name. "Semiramis," she whispered, standing before the ruined gate. "If you remember, come." The wind did not move, the stone did not groan. But the lilies opened, and the gate, long sealed, sighed open like breath released after pain. The guards tried to stop her. They could not move. She stepped past the threshold and vanished. The city braced for screams, for fire, for silence, but none came. Instead, 3 days later, she returned, unburned, unmarked, changed. Her eyes were darker, her voice lower. She walked slower, as though carrying something vast and invisible. When asked what she had seen, she said, "She is not gone, only waiting." "Waiting for what?" The woman smiled, not cruelly, but like one who has walked into dusk and returned. "For someone who does not fear to stay." Then she left, but not alone. Every step she took, lilies bloomed behind her. Not white, but violet. They say she wandered the world, collecting other names. Ishtar, Astarte, Lilith. That she entered palaces and temples and dreams, that the hunger of Semiramis wore new faces. But some say something else. They say the 100 never left either. That every so often, in the deepest night, a man will wake from a dream of silk and moonlight, and find his hands trembling, his heart hollow, and his lips whispering a name he does not know. They say these men walk to rivers, to ruins, to mirrors, and they do not return. But sometimes, just sometimes, they leave behind a single lily, and in places where the lilies grow without soil, without sun, you know, the queen has touched the world again, not as a curse, not as a warning, but as a memory, because love taken wrongly does not die. It becomes story, and story, when whispered long enough, becomes real again. So the next time you walk beneath a violet moon, and the wind carries a perfume you do not recognize, do not follow it. Do not turn toward the voice that says, "Come." Do not step beyond the stones where no flowers should bloom. For Semiramis remembers, and she waits, still. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.